Good evening, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'm Paul Gleeson. I'm chairing the meeting this evening, and to my right is Councillor Susan Welbury, who is my Vice Chair. Before we start the meeting, I need to run through a few things. I would like to remind everyone in attendance this evening that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube. Please note that this meeting will be transcribed to assist with the preparation of minutes. By remaining in the meeting, you are giving your consent to that transcription. When addressing the meeting, please ensure that you do so through the microphone system at all times. You do not need to move the mics or adjust them. Simply raise your hands as normal to indicate you wish to speak, and when you're called, press the central button and use the microphone. Then afterwards, turn it off. I remind members to turn off their mobile phones or switch them to silent. We now move to part one. Finally, please advise abuse or intimidation of any kind will not be tolerated. Any disturbance will result in the meeting being adjourned. Anyone who is deemed to breach these requirements will be warned and asked to refrain. And if the behaviour persists, they will be required to leave the meeting. Part one, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from councillors Richard Austin, David Brown, Anton Danny, Neil Drayton and Stuart Evans.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare any interest in respect of items on tonight's agenda? Counts.
Well, I'm a member of the Police and Crime Panel, so that might be pertinent for tonight's meeting. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
I'm also substituting for Richard Austin. That ought to be mentioned, shouldn't it?
It should be, yes.
Yes. Okay.
Councillor Bright.
I'm a member of the board of PSPS, which has been involved with the pay and conditions elements that we are considering tonight.
I'm the same as Ralph.
Well, Councillor Dorian.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a lifelong trade unionist, still a member of a trade union, and I know that agenda item 2 is going to, if we approve this evening, is going to go on to consult with trade unions. So I just wanted to clear that interest.
Brings us to minutes. Do I have permission to sign the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 15th of January 2026? Thank you. I'll sign at the end of the meeting. Are there any questions from members of the public received 2 clear working days prior to this meeting?
There are none for this meeting, Chair.
Thank you. This brings us to the main part of the agenda, and I'd like to welcome our 2 guests this evening. They're attending virtually, so again, please ensure you use your microphones. And can I suggest, after we've heard from the Chief Constable, that if you introduce yourself, because they won't be able to see your name. If you ask a question or want to talk, please just say who you are. So we've got this evening, and I'm very well from their attendance, we have the Chief Constable of Lincolnshire, Paul Gibson, and Chief Inspector Richard Nethercott. Paul and Richard, thank you for attending, and if you'd like to address the meeting first, and then we'll have some questions and things after.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay, colleagues?
We can.
Oh, good. That's always the first hurdle to get over, to make sure the technology works. So, but first of all, thank you so much for the invite to your scrutiny panel this evening. Obviously, we're quite happy to take any questions from the perspective of Boston and South Holland, of course, Rich has joined us to give us the kind of local context, but I am more than happy, of course, to give the wider context for the force and the direction the force will be taking over the coming months and years ahead. I don't know, Rich, did you want to introduce yourself?
Evening, everybody. Evening, sir. Richard Nethercott. I'm the Chief Inspector for Boston and South Holland. And thank you for inviting me tonight.
Okay, thanks, Rich. And Chair, I'll be guided by your good self around whether you want me to sort of give you a bit of an overview to begin with, or whether you want to jump straight into the questions and we can give the context as we go. But quite happy to do what colleagues would find more useful.
I think it'd be quite useful if we were brought up to speed. Obviously, when we started the process of inviting you was at the time when obviously finances were in question. And since then, obviously, there has been changes, I understand. And also the government is introducing some suggestions for new structures for the police. So I think maybe if you can bring us up to speed on how things are going now and what your future looks like.
Of course, yes, no problem at all. So as you quite rightly point out, Chair, that Lincolnshire Police has faced significant financial constraints. I've been in and around the force, albeit I've been to other forces as well, but spent 20 odd years in and around Lincolnshire Police, and it's always been structurally underfunded, unfortunately. I wish it wasn't the badge of honour almost for the force, but unfortunately it's led to some real constraints in the way that we can plan and deliver our service. I've been back in the force just under 2 years, about 21 months, something like that. And I knew coming back to the force, having worked elsewhere, that the finances would be a challenge. But that said, it's the force that covers my home county and a force that I have lots of professional pride for, having worked there with the good people that do their very best to deliver within the resources that they have. So on the back of that, what we've also had is his Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary, who have inspected us on 2 occasions, the first being pretty much when I first landed back in the force, and then subsequently in terms of child protection inspection. Now, I think the pertinent point of this, without going into details, but of course I will gladly answer questions, is that there are some elements of our practice that need to be better, which is fully accepted. And of course, the Inspectorate is a very important scrutineer of our services, and therefore, we must listen to very carefully to what they tell us. I think to give context, what is also a significant challenge is that some of the issues are about capacity, which obviously links to funding. And also what I would say is that certainly in my time in Lincolnshire and coming back, it's almost led to a compounding of the issue that because the force has to go year to year, sometimes months to months in terms of decisions it can take, and there is sometimes additional funding that is proffered to the force in recognition of the poor state of funding, then what it's not enabled us to do is to plan effectively, or as effectively as other forces and organisations, of course. Now, to cut a very long story short, we've been working with the government, the Commissioner and I and our teams have been working for a long period with the government and having quite significant negotiations around the route forward. Now, again, Chair, I could go on for a long time around the components of all of that. I won't unless you want me to. But what I will say is that in the settlement that has just taken place, then we have a much brighter future because it has been recognised that we are structurally underfunded and there's been some recompense. So if I just give you just a bit of a flavour of what that looks like. Firstly, as colleagues around the table will be aware, we get a certain amount of the funding for Lincolnshire Police from the Central Police grant, which comes from the Home Office. That has increased in itself by just under 5%. Some of that will be swallowed up by inflation, but it's still quite a favourable allocation from the central grant compared to what we used to. The second element is then the precept, which, as colleagues around the table again will know, that's the local taxation, and the government cap was applied as an advisory at £15, and we went to the police and crime panel on Friday, and the panel thankfully voted to increase our amount by £14.90 something, 94 I think it is, forgive me, I don't know the exact detail, but not too far off the £15, which then gives us an extra 4 million or thereabouts in terms of to add to the funding. What we've also received, and I think this is the real game changer for me, which I've obviously shared in the media, is that we've also been given a £12 million per annum stabilisation grant. So that is over a period of 3 years. It is subject to conditions of which we don't know yet, but we'll be working with the Home Office to understand what they are. But fortunately, what this allows us to do is to essentially recruit our resources back to our establishment. So what do I mean by that? Well, because we've had to try and make savings to meet the sort of previous medium-term financial plan, we've reduced our police officer numbers quite considerably, and also our police staff numbers quite considerably. That's only in the recent past. That's not to mention the kind of reductions that have taken place over the years before. As a result of that, what that has shown me is that to reduce on a permanent basis was just not tenable. It wouldn't deliver adequate services, and the good people of Lincolnshire, deserve a better funding settlement to enable us to deliver, much better policing services. And that £12 million per annum grant over 3 years is something that's pretty unprecedented in policing. I anticipated there may be a single year grant. My negotiation and advocation was that actually that wouldn't help us to plan. So therefore, the 3-year grant was agreed. So that takes our operating budget for the next financial year somewhere close to about £196 million. And what that will allow me to do is to increase our police officer numbers to at least 1,190 full-time equivalents. Just for information, we're about 120 down on that number at this point in time. So that just shows you how many officers we've lost, sorry. And also from a police staff point of view, from around about 1,100, we have a 12% vacancy factor. So 12% of those posts are not filled. So at this present time, with the finances that will be made available, there will be significant uplift, both operationally and in terms of the police staff that support our operation delivery. And also critically, I'm pleased to say, an uplift of 20 PCSOs up to an establishment of 50. Now, we did try to negotiate for more because I know visibility is very important in our community and our neighbourhoods. Unfortunately, that didn't work through, but we are seeing an increase in PCSOs as well as officers and our police staff. Now, we're just working through the detail of that at this present time because clearly we need to make sure that we are servicing our neighbourhood policing, also our child protection, also our investigations and our response. So it's a nice position to be in. I've been discussing at length with the Police and Crime Commissioner today and also with my team around investment for Lincolnshire Police, and that's something that I've not been able to discuss for a very long time. So whilst it won't make us, I think I used the term the Police and Crime Panel, gilt-edged, because when we compare ourselves to other most similar forces, we are still relatively underfunded. But compared to the position that we're currently at, it gives us an opportunity to really bolster our numbers and support our communities in keeping the Lincolnshire residents and communities safe. So I hope that gives a context. In terms of the white paper, I'll just cover it off very briefly. At the moment, the white paper for police reform is very high level. the Home Secretary has said that she sees it as a once in a generation opportunity to reform policing. At this present time, we're obviously working closely with the government to see what the impacts may be. Now, there are some areas where you can strengthen certain functions nationally, things like forensics makes absolute sense. There's then a question of where you can strengthen things on a regional basis. We actually do that quite strongly in the East Midlands anyway, with East Midlands Special Operations Unit. But the piece that I'm really keen on, and akin to the point I've just made, is that what we need to make sure is we retain local engagement, local accountability, local connection. And that's the point at which, you know, we're looking very carefully at the detail to see what may happen in the future. But at this moment in time, there's no defined, you know, specific timescales of what will happen when. And as I'm sure colleagues around the table will understand, that this is a very complex, you know, potential transformation of a public service, which needs some considerable thinking. So I hope that helps, Chair. Of course, happy to take any questions from colleagues around the table.
Thank you very much, Chief Constable. It's actually nice to have a relatively good news story. I think
Very much so.
Yeah. Because I must admit, when we started our exercise to invite you here, things were looking much grimmer, weren't they, really? But anyway, if we would like to move on to questions, you were sent some questions in advance from a couple of councillors. I understand some of them you need to get some more details on, but if we start with those councillors, and then we'll have general questions. So the first set of questions from Councillor Izard. If you'd like to ask your questions.
Good evening, and yeah, I go along with it's nice to have some money to spend. So, you know, perception in Boston is still very high as far as it being a crime-ridden town centre. So my questions were basically around the actual details behind that. And as you can see from question one, just how many sort of crimes, what did I use? Crime figures where a weapon has been used. Okay, again, perception is there's a lot of knife carrying around in Boston town centre. So have you got those sort of figures that you can relate to?
Yes, I mean, I'll perhaps just turn to Rich to give the actual local context, if that's helpful, Councillor, and then I can, you know, fill in any kind of wider details. But I know Rich has been doing some work to find the numbers that you've asked for and the answers to the questions. But Rich, could I kindly ask you just to come in on those specific questions to begin with?
Yes, certainly, sir. Right, okay, so for Boston, to summarise, for the question was from 2022 to 2025, the figures where a weapon has been used. Over there's been one murder where a knife was used, and that was our operation name was Op Lil, and that was the unfortunate incident involving Lilia, which has just been through the courts. We've had 5 attempt murders in that period of time where a knife was used, resulting in serious injury. And over the 4 years, we've had 32 Section 18 grievous bodily harms. Now, Section 18 is the highest level of assault beneath murder and attempt murder. And that's as a result of those injuries being a result of the cause with a sharp or bladed implement. We've had, just looking at the other ones, so yeah, one murder, there's been 9 incidents where a sexual offence has taken place. We've had robberies, and with the robberies, the figures are quite high, certainly. So from, just to break them down a bit, 2022 there were 8, 2023 there were 8, 2024 there were 9, and 2025 there were 21. Now, if I could just put a bit of context into that, we've had a reclassification in the law with regards to robbery, and robbery now so also includes shoplifting. And so if I were to go into a shop and suggest that I have a weapon, then that gets reclassified as a robbery. And as a result, our figures for 2025 have gone to 21. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that a knife has been used or seen, or a weapon has been seen. It's just the mere suggestion of it or the threat of it will reclassify it, so it will become classified as a robbery. So the total overall figures for the years. So 2022, there were 57 incidents. 2023, there were 56. 2024, there were 52. And 2025, there was 74. And that increase is in line with the reclassification of robbery. So the figures are reasonably consistent. They sit sort of mid 50s throughout. It's knife crime. Being the chief inspector of Boston, I think the perception is there, and I think a lot of that is heard through the media. But Boston per se, I would say that we don't have a particular knife problem. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Rich. And if I can just ask, just add to that, colleagues, that obviously that's a specific answer to the question raised, of course. And if we consider overall crime, then we're talking minus 1.7% year on year. And if we talk violence with injury, so that's a wider connotation than Rich has explained, so that will include less serious offences. That's down by 13%, and violence without injury is reduced by 13.3%. Now, if I can just add, and I did mention this at the Police and Crime Panel on Friday, we're doing some really in-depth work with the University of Lincoln, and what that allows us to do is to have a really forensic understanding of, we utilise the word demand, but essentially, the calls for service, the crime, the non-crime, based upon area, based upon volume, based upon classification of crime. And essentially, that is there to make sure that we allocate our resources to where they're needed. So rest assured, we keep a very close eye upon our crime figures, so that we can quite rightly feed back to panels such as this, but also so we can make sure that within the resources that we have, which is now a better news story because they're going to grow over the next year, we can then start to allocate resources according to need. And there will be some additional resources that will come to Boston. I can't tell you exactly how many or where as yet, I'm sure you'll appreciate, but we're doing that detailed planning as we speak.
That's right, Zod.
Thank you for that, and you've answered question 2, so there's no need for that one. Maybe not so much perception, but certainly listening to our business owners, and shoplifting seems to be on the rise, and obviously some of it gets reported, some of it doesn't. And I was just wondering, again, with the allocation of new funding, whether you've got anything you could particularly look at to help our local businesses who suffer quite financial loss through shoplifting.
Yeah, I think the point you quite rightly raise around, perception is hugely important. We definitely get that. But again, I'll let Rich just cover off some of the work that's been done on shoplifting, particularly Operation Continence. And then I can perhaps then just give a future viewpoint around shop theft and where we may be going with it in the future. But is that okay, Rich?
Yes, thank you. So Op Continence is a partnership approach to shoplifting. It was a coordinated multi-agency initiative that's delivered solid results against shop theft in Boston. The multi-agency enforcement lead has led to multiple arrests and charges for repeat shop offenders. Swift action resulted on any CBO breaches, interception of thefts through proactive patrols, and evidence collection for ongoing investigations. Operation Continent's targeted retail crime that's delivered a consistent, clear message to the prolific offenders and showing that shop theft and associated crime will not be tolerated. With Boston, historically, we had one of the highest rates of shop theft in the county. This initiative, which was led by our neighbourhood policing team, and we've managed to work with our partner agencies, such as Probation, Lincolnshire Recovery Partnership, Pesco Security, Kingdom Security, Lidl, Aldi and Asda security teams, and Boston Borough Council, ASB community safety officers, and the CCTV operators. And we've had specific days of action, and we've targeted individuals, and we've targeted areas. And the Boston has a small number of individuals who commit the bulk of the crime. I think on one occasion, so on one day of action alone, we arrested 4 people, and as a result, we cleared up 50 crimes with those 4 individuals. And as a result, they were obviously arrested, they were presented to the courts, and then the courts would deal with them as they see fit. This has been ongoing. The neighbourhoods team have been doing an amazing job, and albeit the thefts still continue, it's still the same individuals, and we know who they are. The partner agencies that we spoke about know who they are. We still use the local radios to communicate with each other, and as and when they are in the area, they will be swiftly dealt with and presented to the courts. Prior to the days of action, there's a huge amount of work that goes on, and the evidence is gathered before the day of action, and so when the individual is arrested, we're ready to go. We're ready to interview them. We're ready to get the files charged and present them to the court. So it's some real positive work that's been going on there. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. And just to pick up on a theme there, if I may, that we know shop theft is, a reasonable presents a reasonable proportion of all our offending across Lincolnshire, around 10% or so. And again, please don't quote me on that because that'll differ between different areas. But as Rich says, that is actually committed by a relatively small number of offenders. And moving forward with our investment, and again, we're still working out the detail, what we want to be able to do is focus far more on proactivity and prevention. So targeting persistent shoplifters, also utilising criminal behaviour orders, and what Rich has said in Boston, we replicate in Lincoln, and you can very quickly get control of that small number of people that are offending, providing you've got the right resources and you have the partnership and assistance of shop owners and of course our kind of wider partners as well. So that's definitely the direction I want to go in. I hear it loud and clear that shop theft is an issue for our communities, and also as part of the government's neighbourhood policing guarantee. So this is targets that we're set in terms of how much we invest in terms of new neighbourhood policing, PCSOs or officers or volunteers. We want to be able to focus on that far more. So I hope that helps in terms of just explaining the position and our approach going forward.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for that in-depth report. It's good that you've got some ideas and policies going forward. And last one, just on a local level, obviously I volunteer at the local theatre and often in town during the night. And sometimes it's surprising that our car drivers seem to use it as a bit of a skid pan and a kind of acceleration away. Remembering that still we have families around in the town centre at that time of night. And for the last 8 evenings, whilst I've seen the car drivers in town, I've yet to see any kind of local policing to say, you know, be aware of what you're doing and how you're doing it. Have you got any kind of thoughts going forward on that one?
Yeah, again, I'll just hand to Rich for the local perspectives, and I'll perhaps just add after that, if that's okay.
Yeah, okay. So we recently ran Op Exhaust with our road policing unit, and that was covered in Boston. We linked in with again partner agencies so that we could have vehicles inspected at the time of stopping them. We knew roughly where these individuals were, and the road policing unit and our partner agencies are well versed in the vehicles that they use. So we will target those. So just for some figures, so we recently we targeted what we classed as the boy races. This resulted in Section 59 tickets. So multiple drivers were issued with Section 59 tickets for the antisocial use of the vehicle. And excuse my ignorance, I don't know the full understanding of the Section 59, but if they are given a Section 59 warning and that vehicle is then used in similar activity, we can seize that vehicle, regardless of whether it's the same driver. The vehicle could be, so if they're using mum's car and they get stopped, they get given the warning, and then they go off again. My understanding is that so there's a microphone as well. Hello. I think it must be something in the room.
Gremlins have got in.
Turn your microphone. How's that?
Okay. So better.
Are we back on, or is there still some echo?
No,
Yeah.
that's better now.
Okay, I shall carry on. So we seized vehicles. Several vehicles were seized with unsafe conditions for government places. Inspections of vehicles were checked for illegal modifications of safety defects, such as tyres and insufficient tread, or the exhaust. The collaboration involved between road policing unit, local neighbourhood policing teams, supported with the CCTV monitoring. We had our media there, so they were able to publicise the fact, which was well received through the events.
Okay, thanks, colleagues. Did you hear that okay? I know there was some feedback on our side, but was that okay for you?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I think that's gone, but certainly from an antisocial behaviour point of view, again, fully understood of the need to make sure that we are continually assessing these sorts of issues, because I do understand how the antisocial behaviour impacts on our communities. So again, with neighbourhood policing, I'm sure colleagues will be aware, I've got to make a sort of I've got to make assessment between visible policing within our communities, but also consider the hidden harm. So that harm that goes on, within families and within communities that fortunately most people don't experience, and as I'm sure you appreciate, constantly trying to make that sort of prioritisation between the two. That's quite a considerable echo, so I'm hoping you can hear it okay.
Yes, we can hear fine.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that covers that.
Sorry, the final question is from Councillor David Scoot. Well, not the final question, the prepared question.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, do the police no longer have an interest in enforcing the law with regards to minor crimes, such as cycling in no cycling areas? We have quite often on busy times on a Saturday and a Wednesday when the market's on, use cycling through Straight Bargate, pulling wheelies without respect for public safety, and nothing seems to be getting done with that.
Okay, again, I'll let Rich give the local context, if that's okay, Rich.
Yeah, of course. I think certainly the wording of the question, I think it's a little bit unfair in the sense that we have no interest. It's a difficult area to manage. It's a difficult area to staff, but it is managed well by our PCSOs on patrol or when we do the hotspot policing. But the issues that we have is that the signage to the pedestrian area is quite poor. We have a large Eastern European community, and the signage for a no riding a bike is the red circle with a bike in the middle. That could quite easily be misinterpreted as to say that it could be a cycling area. The youth or the individuals, when stuck on the bike, they are spoken to. The street wardens, where possible, do assist. Ordinarily, we would look to give them words of advice to try and prevent them from riding the bike. We also have had a walk around with the local councils and some partner agencies, and we would like, or we would suggest, that the town centre in itself could have a bike safe area to encourage people that do ride their bikes in the town. So, for example, a bike lane. The pedestrianised area does allow the bus to go through it, but bikes aren't allowed to go through it. So if we could put a defined cycle lane as such, that might help with the problem. But we do appreciate your concerns. We do, where possible and when we're out and about, stop individuals who are riding the bike and ask them to walk. And as I say, words of advice would ordinarily be given. I hope that covers that.
Okay.
Thanks, Rich. Thank you. But your information is slightly out of date. The bus no longer goes through Straight Bargate.
Okay, apologies. That's my misunderstanding.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that covers that, Chair. I'm happy to take any further questions, of course.
The questions sent in advance. So, do any members have any other questions? Councillor Pierpoint.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Right. What are Lincolnshire Police doing to give the public confidence that Boston is a safe place to visit and shop, both not only in the daytime, but particularly the evening, where businesses are struggling due to problems that happens in the evening time?
Okay. Again, I'll let Rich just cover. Oh, we've got an echo again. The nighttime economy, Rich, if you can, and then that's better. Thank you. And then I'll follow up.
Okay, thank you. The calls for service has dropped. We are, during the summer period, it did go up, and ordinarily year on year, that would be the busiest period for the antisocial behaviour, purely simply because of the schools. But it has come down recently, and likewise the ASB for calls for service which are closed as ASB, and that would mean that if an incident were called in and then it were finalised as ASB. So again, those figures are coming down, and they currently calls for service closed is below the average. We have had the hotspot policing, which has been a huge success. Really well received, and that will be officers with a designated amount of money that's provided by our PCC, and this provides ordinarily 2 officers who would be just assigned to walk the streets. They would be highly visible, and they would be there to communicate with the public, visit the shops, and deal with any issues that they face there and then. As far as the the day-to-day business, we still have the good quantity of PCSOs that cover the area, and they are out and about. Likewise with the neighbourhoods policing team, with the initiatives that they're going. We've got a really good neighbourhoods team, young in service, dead keen, and do a great job. We will provide as much reassurance. We will respond to incidents as quickly as we can, job permitting. But overall, it's the visibility. I'd like to think that we're trying to provide as much visibility as possible, and which will provide reassurance. There are some areas such as West Street. Again, you know, it is fairly dark. It is fairly, we would say that we would request if the lighting could be improved, and I know that's been discussed before. That would help reassure people. Yeah, as far as the police are concerned, trying to do as much as we can just to reassure the public that we're about, and ASB is coming down as a result of it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I personally think you need a campaign, some sort of communications campaign to the public to give them the confidence that the police do care, they are looking into these issues, and that Boston is a safe place. People walking around is fine, not everybody sees those people. I just think you need a strong campaign to inform the public that Boston is a safe place to go in the evening times and daytime, and give people the confidence, especially the elderly who don't like going out when it gets dark. I've got a lot of people in my ward who complain that they're frightened to go into the town centre, sometimes even in the daytime, never mind the evening time. So I just think that you guys could do something a bit more stronger on the communication basis and put a campaign together and give people the assurance that you do really care and things are really happening. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll certainly take that back, because we do try to run, quite a lot of communication and public relations campaigns. Some locally driven, with social media and other kind of media, and also from a local perspective as well, from a Lincolnshire perspective, I should say. We are pushing out Lincolnshire alerts, which colleagues may be aware of, and I'm very keen to make that, our staple two-way communication. And I think as time progresses, we've just procured that system. It should help us to be able to deliver bespoke communications for particular areas that people would find useful. And I think that talks to the point that you raised, Councillor. So thank you for that. I'll certainly take that back.
I have another question, if you don't mind, Chairman. Just for your information, I don't know if you knew this, but there's a new town centre business association being set up in Boston, mainly, I think, comprising of independent retailers. And going back to the issue of shoplifting, I think it would be very beneficial if the police represented themselves at probably one of their meetings and gave them the assurance that they do care about shoplifting. Because at the moment, you mention all the big names of the big brands, like Asda and Lidl and Aldi, but independent retailers are the ones that's really struggling and suffering. They don't have the resources to manage shoplifting like the big boys do. And I think it would be very good if you guys could go to one of their meetings and actually give them the confidence that you are really caring about their independent retail operations. And I think that, again, that would give them a different slant on the police, really bothering and really caring about helping them. Just a thought. Thank you.
Okay, we've got something in Lincoln. I'll let Rich come. Sorry, got reverb. Is there a microphone open? Oh, that's better. Thank you. So there's Lincoln Business Improvement Group, for example, that we work very closely with, and that the police are an active member of that board, and that is around being able to share, initiatives and approaches, but also for businesses to help themselves as well in terms of prevention, which of course is very important. Again, Rich, you'll probably know more about this local. Sorry, there's a reverb, so it's putting me off slightly. But you'll probably know more about this local initiative, Rich. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I'm more than happy to either attend or ask my neighbourhood inspector, Ian Costa, to attend. He would probably be better placed than myself, or I would accompany him. But he would deal with the more local day-to-day issues. If you're able to either put the details in the chat or email me directly with the details, and I can link in with Ian and ask him to make contact. And yeah, by all means, we're certainly, we deal with the bigger supermarkets because they have their own security staff. That would be the main reason, but we're not forgetting the smaller retail outlets. But more than happy if you don't mind providing me with a contact for this group, and yeah, we'll get in touch with those.
Yeah, I think that'd be great, and we'll certainly take that as an action, Rich. I think that makes absolute sense. And for example, in the Lincoln Business Improvement Group, there is actually some joint working where some of the local shops have actually joint funded somebody to assist in taking statements, retrieving CCTV, to assist us in our capacity, and therefore working in partnership to good effect. So again, there's an opportunity for joint working and partnership working, which we will always welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Dorian, then Councillor Pryke.
Thank you. Good evening, Chief Constable. My name's Anne Dorian. I'm a ward councillor for Skirbeck Ward in Boston. Good evening, Richard. I'd like to start, Chief Constable, by recognising the sterling work that your organisation does in Boston. Fran Harrod, Richard Nethercott, Ian Cotton, all your neighbourhood teams, the police sergeants, are all friends to this organisation here in Boston. They work very well with Boston Borough Council. Nothing is ever too much trouble. And we have worked tirelessly together around the issues of antisocial behaviour, especially when we introduced hotspot policing, which, as Richard mentioned, was very successful and continues to be. So I'm not sure what some of my colleagues heard earlier, but I, for one, believe that with the funding pressures you've faced, you've absolutely done everything you possibly could have done and more, because I have known them to go far above and beyond what they perhaps needed to do for their job description. So I just want to recognise that and honour that and thank you for that tonight. Now, the next point I'm going to make, Chief Constable, is a bit more political, and I appreciate you cannot or should not perhaps make political comments. But in a classic case of be careful what you wish for, I was delighted when government announced that they would be abandoning the police and crime commissioners, only then to be horrified to find that they're going to transfer those powers to the directly elected mayors. Unfortunately, we have a mayor who believes that you operate a two-tier policing system, something that I couldn't disagree with more. And I worry that that kind of incoherent message gets passed on to members of the general public. That's a political point I know you can't possibly make. But what I would like to ask you, Chief Constable, is what transition arrangements have you started to make, if any, with regards to those authorities that are going to pass from Mark Jones to Andrea Jenkins? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for the positive comments. You know, I chose to come back to Lincolnshire as my home force because I do believe this organisation has a sense of magic and good people do good things. And, you know, ironically, that's probably been born out of many years of having to be creative in terms of how we deliver the best service we possibly can. And I know that 99.9% of our people are there for public ethos and public service and want to do their level best. So it's really positive to hear those comments. Thank you. I will just mention, and I know this might sound like police speak, and I don't wish it to, but I've reintroduced what is called a geographical model. So we now have an east and a west division, essentially, so that we are much better aligned to our communities, our local authorities, and that sort of partnership working, which is really important. I won't bore you with the kind of, you know, the different levels and types of configuration of operating models, but that's certainly something I've done to make sure we are geographically responsive to our communities. In terms of the transition arrangements, obviously the the government have made their decision around PCCs, and that'll be from May 2028. Again, I can't speak on behalf of Mark, but I'm sure he would advise that he is in touch with the Greater Lincolnshire Mayor and is starting with those productive conversations around how that transition takes place, and to do it with, to make sure there's no issues and it's seamless in terms of how it's executed. I mean, what I would say is that, working with the Mayor, she has been supportive in terms of writing to the government around some of the funding issues. So I can say that from a factual basis, that we've obviously worked with stakeholders, and actually it's probably an opportune point just to say thank you to colleagues around the table, because what we did have was a real swell of support in writing to the Home Secretary and the Policing Minister around the challenges that Lincolnshire Police face, and I have no doubt that that has assisted in getting us to a more positive place, which I've obviously taken you through. So, from my perspective, as I know you've mentioned, I won't give a view on the sort of political element of it, but I'm just keen to work from an operational point of view with all partners to best influence, the best outcomes for our communities, because that's certainly why we're here. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, Chief Constable and Chief Inspector.
Good evening.
I wanted to make a note for everybody tonight that Boston is not just the town. There are a lot of people in the villages around the town in this borough, and they have quite a lot of concerns about policing. Now, I'll also put on record that Inspector Cotton came to the Parish Council Liaison meeting here in this room last week, and what he had to say to the Parish Council representatives was very well received, because a lot of people were expecting that with your financial rejigging, the villages are going to lose out big time. In fact, I believe they're retaining PCSOs as points of contact and so on. And so people in the villages will be able to, follow up things that are of concern to them. I'd also pay credit to you for the visibility of your rural policing unit. We know quite a bit about the hair coursing stuff that is going on and that you're dealing with. We of course see police cars speeding up and down the A roads and dealing with road traffic accidents all the time. And we do see police officers in the villages from time to time. But like everybody else, we'd like more visibility. And I'm sure you're aware of that across the whole of the county. But thank you for your continuing commitment to the more rural bits of our area and the rest of the county. Now, a number of police units around the country describe themselves as a service. Lincolnshire Police describes itself as a police force, and there's an obvious difference between a service and a force. Force implies control, occupation, and a whole lot of negative things, which I'm not attributing to you. But would you consider changing the name of policing in Lincolnshire to a police service?
Okay, thank you. And there's a number of really relevant points there that I can just cover off, if that is helpful. So colleagues may be aware of what we've called glide path, which that's probably what Inspector Cotton may have spoken about, just with regard to our lowest officer numbers being in May of 2026. And therefore what we've had to do is to move some officers and staff to areas that we just simply have to be able to police because of the risk. So that's response policing, as you can imagine, public protection and child abuse, and also investigations, particularly complex and high risk investigations. Now, I made it clear to the Police and Crime Panel last week that that wasn't a decision we wanted to take, but unfortunately, because of the financial position, we've had to do that for a short period in order to cover off those functions that are required whilst we can grow our numbers again. So that will take place over the next 6 months or so. But what I've also made clear is none of those teams have been disbanded in full. There have been some, I think, rumours circulating that certain teams have been, completely eradicated, which is not the case. And I certainly, take your point and appreciate it around rural crime, because our rural crime team, they're only a small number of officers, but wow, they do a fantastic job around hair coursing, around plant theft, and really around, to one of your colleagues' points, around being able to raise the issues and be able to show, some really good practice in Lincolnshire. So as we move forward, we will have beats, we will have areas where there are designated community beat managers or PCSOs. Those PCSOs are going to grow by a small amount. I would prefer it to be more, but you can rest assured that neighbourhood policing is still the bedrock for me of policing in Lincolnshire. I understand the visibility question, and as I think I mentioned early on, working with Mark Jones, we tried to negotiate with government to increase our PPSOs and our neighbourhood policing officer quite considerably. Unfortunately, that couldn't happen, albeit we've got this additional funding. What I will say also is we've been trialling something as part of our transformation called Enhanced Video Review. And this is for certain calls for service, and we think it could be up to 30,000. What happens is we speak to people via video. So obviously we've got a massive county, and where it's relevant and where the personal contact, having physically been there, is not required, then we can actually do a much better job by video. And the feedback we've had from the pilots that we've run is that victims are really, really happy and very satisfied with the outcome they receive. Of course, there are some crimes that is not relevant for. The reason I mention is because if we can essentially deal with some of the calls for service much more efficiently, what that allows us to do then is ensure our response teams are going back to, can I say, some good old-fashioned policing, where we're not just responding hour after hour, minute after minute to calls for service. What we're doing is also being proactive and actually getting about in communities and sticking our nose in things and, finding out what's really going on, which, I'm very keen to support. In terms of police service and police force, I mean, we are Lincolnshire Police. I work for Derbyshire Constabulary, and that's a constabulary. We are Lincolnshire Police. I think it's probably a colloquialism that sometimes it's referred to as a police force and a police service. Certainly, there's no connotation from me of law enforcement and control. We are very much here to serve the public, and I hold that very dear to sort of values that I try and expose for the organisation. So I don't think we're officially called a police force. I think that's probably just some of the terminology that's used in the media. We are known as Lincolnshire Police, and I would always say service in the communications I utilise when talking with our communities. I hope that came through. I've still got some reverb, so it's slightly putting me off, but hopefully that was clear and made sense.
Well, thank you for those comments, and I'll be very pleased to pass on the transcript of our stuff tonight to my colleagues and the residents of the area I represent. I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself to begin with. My name is Ralph Pryke, and I'm a councillor for Curtin and Frampton.
Good to meet you, Ralph.
I'm a rural councillor in that respect. Now, my last point is about confidence in policing, which we're all going to agree is necessary. So, should Lincolnshire people be able to know if police officers and police staff are members of the Freemasons?
Okay. I think Rich just had your hand up. I don't know if that was the last point. Rich, was it?
Yeah, it was, sir. I was just going to add, in relation to your previous question, With regards to glide path, we are looking at we have quite a healthy quota of PCSOs, and we are introducing super beats. And the PCSOs are all local. They know the areas incredibly well, and they cover the areas very well. And as a result of the super beats, so you will, for example, say in Curtin, you will have a named PCSO and likelihood as a named CBM. That if you have issues, you can contact directly. But if everything were to be okay in, say, Curtin, but there was an issue in another area, then we would divert those individuals to that area, ensuring that your area was covered as well. So we are having a huge oversight of the area, including the villages, with the PCSOs, with the CBMs. The neighbourhood work that goes on is amazing in Boston South End. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. And in terms of the second question around confidence of the public, I couldn't agree more. I'm not going to quote the Pelian principles, we all know them, but the confidence of the public is just immeasurable in terms of being able to be our eyes and ears and to work with us in terms of making our communities safer and flourishing places that they should be. I think, in terms of members of particular groups, again, we could have a long discussion about this because there are things that are prescribed organisations that you just can't belong to. There are things that aren't, but some people will have a subjective view about whether that's appropriate or not. In terms of the specifics around Freemasons, I'm happy that within the force and the governance that we have, that the checks and balances are there where we make transparent, objective, evidence-based decisions in terms of how we operate. And again, I'm not making any connotations about a membership of any groups, but from my perspective, I like to look at it from the perspective of how we make sure that the organisation operates in the fairest way and how we can best share that with the public. So I hope that covers that, because again, we could have an ethical debate around all sorts of different organisations. But for me, I couldn't agree more. The confidence of policing is hugely important. I have to say, in Lincolnshire generally, I know people will tell us what they think, and we don't always get things perfectly right, but I think we actually enjoy the confidence of the public in the context of the resources we have, and for that I am very, very grateful, because partnership meetings like this, where we can actually speak with our local democratically elected officials, is hugely important, and generally the partnership is very positive and effective.
So thank you very much for that.
Paul and Richard, can I thank you on behalf of the committee? I think we've learned a lot tonight. It's been valuable for us, and I hope it's been valuable for you to an extent. And I'd like to reiterate what Councillor Dorian said. I actually think you've worked miracles achieving what you've achieved with the limited funds you've got. So I'm very hopeful now that you will be able to take advantage of the slightly improved position, and people will start to understand that in fact maybe things aren't quite as bad as they're often portrayed. But thank you both for your time, and again, you're very useful what we've learned today.
Thank you, and thanks again. Thank you for the invite. We're very, very grateful. I think the point that you make, Chair, is that clarity and explanation is just so important in the business that we are in, and to be able to give that and give some, hopefully some reassurance and some context around the world that we operate in and how we are here to support you as best we can has hopefully helped. And and I couldn't say more around being an advocate for policing, because I guess people who have a bad experience will tell lots of other people who've had a bad experience. I think to be able to work with colleagues like you and to be able to be an advocate where you say, well, actually, you know, they've got a point about this or that, or the explanation is, you know, whatever it might be to whatever the issue is really important, because that confidence, as you say, is hugely important. So thanks for the invite, and very good to see you.
So again, thank you very much, and sorry for the microphone difficulties we had.
As long as you can hear okay.
As long as you can hear okay.
When it's playing back in your ears, it's great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Take care. Good night.
Take care. Good night. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Good night. Thank you. Good night.
Do you want a couple of minutes break, folks, or should we carry on? Yes.
It's provisional.
Can you use the microphone, please? Because if people are watching this, they won't hear what you're saying.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Doran. The £12 million is given for this year, but it's provisional for the next two. So it's a very dicey situation still. Okay, I was going to say, actually, I mean, I've written to the minister several times. I think it would be a good idea if we all wrote regularly to put pressure on them, because the more pressure you can put on the minister, the better, because it's still a very, very dicey situation. Lincolnshire Police is really on the edge, even with this 12 million. I didn't want to say anything tonight because it's your chance to talk to the Chief Constable, but that's the situation really. I'm well aware of what's going on. If you can write, please do. Okay.
If we're happy to move on, the next item is terms and conditions. The second item on the agenda. The next phase of, we've been bringing into line our terms and conditions, and the next phase is about to happen. So it starts on page 5 of your agenda, and it'll be presented by the head of HR and organisation development of PSPS, Alison Watmore. Alison. Sorry, Eileen, sorry.
Okay, thank you for that, evening councillors. So the paper is representing the next phase of the alignment of officer terms and conditions, and it brings forward the policies as well, along with the proposals, which we're hoping to take to council for effectively this committee's feedback and input. Phase 1 concluded last year, which for BBC officers was actually 2 sets of aligned terms that were taken through. And this is what we're classing as phase 2, which will mop up the remainder of the terms that the partnership is looking to align. So in getting to phase 2, we've worked with senior officers to develop the proposals, and this looks at aligning the remaining terms, obviously subject to council approvals. And the proposals see 9 terms aligned to the best of across the Partnership Council. So all the proposals have been evaluated. They've been assessed for cost impact, as well as kind of impacts on services and potential of any risk. And the proposals in this report have been through senior leadership team, portfolio holders, stakeholder board, and obviously we're asked to bring it here before it goes ahead to council. In terms of the paper that you have, we've included a table of all 9 kind of proposals. Those that are highlighted in grey are already represent Boston is at the best of, so there won't actually be a change for Boston, but we wanted to include it just so you've got visibility of everything that's being proposed. And a number of the proposals will obviously see terms and conditions changing. But what we have appended is the policy amendments that will be proposed for Boston Borough Council if these proposals are agreed and subject to consultation. So that sees a whole new proposed policy for car loans and 2 appendices, because the existing policies are already aligned across the partnership. It's just a provision of these terms that varies currently. These provisions, if following council approval, will be subject to consultation with both unions and officers. And I'm presenting it here today because this does have a couple of provisions that will equally impact senior officers. So it's appropriate that we present it instead of senior officers.
Thank you for that. So I'll open the meeting now. Are there any comments or questions? We're asked tonight to comment and to make any suggestions if we can. So are there any comments or questions? And Councillor Doreen.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Aileen, for that. I've just got a couple of questions. First of all, regarding your consultation with trade unions and staff, are there any red lines that would bring this back for a revisit or for us to look at it again?
So what we would look to do is align to, the intention will be to align to the best of which proposals are. It's fully expected through the consultation we will receive feedback, and obviously based on that, that will go initially into SLT, etc., to seek their views. What we're suggesting in the process we'll take to council is if, for instance, there's any suggestion that the proposals will be greater than what is being proposed, yeah, we would need to potentially come back to council, certainly on any items that would see, for instance, things that would be aligned in the pay policy statement as an example, redundancy being one of them explicit for Boston. We would definitely look for that having to come back into a council process.
Continue. Can I continue?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Aileen. My other question really is around the mobility clause, and I just wondered that if there were any protections for staff, say that have caring responsibilities, disabilities, or limited access to transport. And part B of that question is there an appeals process? Should there be a bit of conflict in a manager deciding where somebody's work base is going to be? Thank you.
Yeah, so the mobility clause, so just to define it, it's really a kind of a standard provision in the contract that just sets out how the partnership might, if there was a need to move services or consider it. The reality is what underpins it is other policies that you operate in. So the contract will define their location of work, and there'll be various things at play. So whether it's reasonable from distance, miles would be considered kind of normal rule of thumb. Best practice would look at things like HMRC guidance around that sort of thing. But you also have your expenses policy, you have other provisions if you're moving locations. So it won't be kind of, there'll be a whole piece that's considered about it. It just enables the council to have that flexibility should it need it. With regards to consideration to individual circumstances, yeah, and I think the reality is agile and hybrid also operate. So the need for people to necessarily work, let's say 5 days in some of these locations doesn't exist anymore. You've certainly got people that are present. Some of your more place-based teams are present, but they're unlikely to be sent somewhere else because their role is very much in the community in that area. So it's hard to say that there won't be a consideration at some point. There isn't a direct appeals process linked to, but I would say there is always the framework of the grievance process or issues if someone disagrees with how they've been handled at work.
That's all. Thank you, Aileen. Thank you.
Is there any areas in this document here, I've been reading through it and trying to digest it all, where the council staff here are going to be disadvantaged by being realigned with the other two partnership?
No, the proposals are only brought forward where they would align to the best of. So it's either being protected hence the ones in grey. So it's not reducing, it's not improving either. So for instance, for Boston Holiday, we didn't put that in grey, but the majority of your officers, the other councils are actually aligning to Boston, which has a better annual leave provision. The reason we didn't fully put it in grey is because for service managers, which is a certain level of manager, the East Lindsey provision was slightly better. So because we're trying to align to the best of, we're taking a bit of a tailored approach. So no, that in principle won't be anything that people are worse off by. This should see them move to the best of all the provisions that are aligning. But this doesn't align absolutely everything. There will be a couple of things that for various reasons aren't brought forward. So people may have views on that, but obviously that will be handled through the consultation.
And is there more to come of this down the line? More sort of realignment to come?
Obviously subject to consultation. So if there's a reason we can't get through, the partnership might decide to bring something back at a later day. But no, the majority of all terms are aligned. There's a couple of provisions that when we looked at and went through the various stages before now, it was decided it would be too expensive or too problematic to align. So there's a couple of provisions not, but there's no intention to visit that. That was the decision made. But then obviously we don't know what the future will be with LGR, but this is for the partnership alone. No, this will conclude the alignment.
And the last question from me is, when all this is in place, if it gets in place, are the staff going to have new contracts of employment with all these amendments in?
Yeah, the conclusion of it, in our view, is to issue a new contract of employment so that we can capture everything. Obviously, that will protect their continuous service. So we're not looking at kind of wholesale new contracts, but variations become somewhat redundant because we're pretty much changing the bulk of it. So, and again, it's quite confusing for people that have worked here for many, many years that have multitude of variations. So we want to kind of wrap it into a singular contract for them so they've got clarity on what their terms are moving forward.
Councillor Pryke?
Chairman, thank you for the presentation, Eileen, which I half heard at another meeting before. Some members of staff here in Boston are beginning to talk and wonder about our successor organisation. Now, assuming all this lot goes through, and I can't see any reason why it won't, and people get new contracts of employment, as and when they're stupid to our successor organisation, will all this lot go with it? Or might there be variations straight away?
I can't predict what it would be. All I can talk about is from the context of employment law. So TUPE will protect the provisions that they're under. There may be a new authority may decide to, through measures, amend policies as an example, or align policies slightly. But normally TUPE will protect the terms that an individual has. So it will be very difficult for someone to implement something that is less than the provision they're already on. But that's not to say, again, under TUPE there are provisions for that, but it's quite complicated and quite legalistic, so it would be difficult to see that. No, this should transfer.
Anybody else? No, well, thank you for the report. Again, it seems to make sense, and as you say, in general, obviously staff are being brought on to the better of the conditions. So we've recorded the points made by members, and we're happy with this to go forward, aren't we? Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
And now this brings us to the next item on the agenda, item 3, data protection policy and records management policy, which starts at page 23 of the agenda. This is being presented by the Group Manager for Information Governance and Data Protection Officer, Richard Steele. Richard, welcome.
Thank you very much. Just before we start, I must apologise for an error on page 24 and 25, where I've incorrectly referenced to an executive board instead of the cabinet. So we'll make that change when it goes to the next place. So the council is entirely reliant on the availability and quality of the information it holds. To underpin this, the council's data protection and records management policies have been updated to comply with the latest statutory requirements. This includes additional changes to UK GDPR, Data Protection Act, and to incorporate changes from the new Data Use and Access Act 2025, which is prefixed to DUAA. These updates are aimed to align the policies across the South and East Lincolnshire Council's partnership, and this is all within pages 23 to 42 in your packs. The policies have been rewritten completely to ensure that as a pair they form a robust integrated framework, and as such has been brought together here and presented together. The policies are an expected part of the controls required by the Information Commission's Office. The key updates. So on page 29 in your pack is the data protection policy. This now reflects the Data Use and Access Act. Key changes in relation to that are it formalises a new complaints process. It's outside of the council's complaint process and it follows the same schema as required by the Information Commissioner's Office. The new policy reflects a reduced burden in respect to rights requests and data subject access requests. The new legislation has lifted any search of personal data from exhaustive to proportionate. So previously as a council, we looked everywhere for personal data, and now we can do a proportionate search, which reduces the burden on the authority. The policy is redrafted to follow professional guidance and has been gap tested against a range of other councils. The records management policy, which is on page 39 of your packs, establishes a high-level framework for managing records, establishing principles for accuracy, security, and appropriate retention. The policy does support the councils by adding into the governance framework in respect to the use of AI in support of the council's AI policy. The policy focuses more on the storage and retention of any information held by the council, including that not covered by the Data Protection Act. The policy is based on information provided in the Code of Practice issued by the ICO under the Freedom of Information Act. And this provided guidance on records management. This policy underpins the council's obligation to transparency, and for clarity, much of the security aspects are covered in the IT security policy and therefore don't appear in this particular policy. In conclusion, the draft policies together create a unified framework for information governance supporting compliance, efficiency and public trust. These policies, when implemented, will build on the council's safe use and availability of information to be used by the council to deliver services. The recommendation is that the committee is to review the draft policies and recommend to Cabinet for approval.
Are there any questions? Comment? Councillor Fairpoint.
Thank you, Richard. As a councillor, if by accident I do something wrong here, am I covered by the council itself, or do I have to get independent insurance to cover myself in case of any backlash?
Thank you. As a councillor, if you're acting on behalf of a council, you are covered by the council's insurance provision. As a ward member or as a member of a political party, you are designated data controller, and that is in your sphere to arrange your insurance or your cover.
So we have to be very clear then in what we're acting in to make sure that we keep ourselves within the guidelines and limits of what this act and policy does, yeah?
That's correct.
Anybody else? Thank you for the report. Again, it's well written and made sense. And as I understand it, really, it's bringing this isn't something we decide we're not going to do, is it really? So it brings us in line with law. We've been asked to recommend the 2 appendices to Cabinet for approval. I'm happy to propose that from the chair. Is it seconded? Seconded. All those in favour? Are you sure? So that's carried. Thank you for your time on that, Richard. And this brings us to the next item on the agenda, item 4, Council Procedure Rule 11, questions by members. This will be presented by the Assistant Director, Governance and Monitoring Officer, John Medler.
Thanks, Chairman. Good evening, members. You'll recall at the council meeting in January, there was a motion on notice which was proposed and seconded to amend the questions on notice council procedure rule. And at the end of the debate, there was a point of order raised from Councillor Doran regarding the fact that there was no monitoring officer report attached with that motion on notice, and that the Constitution required a monitoring officer report to be provided when you were considering changes to the Constitution. So accordingly, I advised that the motion would have to return to a future council meeting. Further to that, when looking at the report and looking at the council's constitution, there is a further procedure rule that requires any changes to your council procedure rules to be considered first by a committee before they can be considered by the full council, and hence why this report is brought here tonight to comply with those 2 requirements for a committee to firstly consider the motion, a change to a council procedure rule, and secondly, you'll see my report is attached within the pack at Appendix 1. So in terms of the actual my report, you can see that in terms of councils and council procedures, questions on council at council meetings, there is quite a wide variety of approaches that councils take to this particular matter. You can see there are some examples which I've included as an annex, which show that some councils do not have any limitations on questions that councillors may raise at a council meeting, and then a variety of other methods that councils use to limit the number of questions, which relate generally around either time that is permitted, the number of questions that is permitted, or the length of questions that's permitted, or a combination of those. So you have some examples within the pack. Obviously, currently Boston's constitution doesn't place any limitation, and the proposed motion on notice would have meant that councillors can submit 1 question to per full council meeting, and would be able to continue to ask a further supplementary question arising directly out of the original question. I've included a copy of the current rules in Annex 2 for your information tonight. In terms of the impacts of this, limiting the number of questions on notice does mean that members are restricted by the number of questions that they're permitted to raise at a full council meeting, which are relevant to the work of the council or affect Borough. But in terms of limiting those questions, it can also mean that it frees up additional time to focus on other items that are on the agenda, so that questions don't either dominate or override the business. So that is the sort of trade-off between the 2. Lawfully, it's up to the council to determine its procedure rules, as long as it complies with the legislation. And as you can see, there are a wide variety of approaches that councils take. So it's not unlawful to restrict those questions in any particular way. And so it is really for the council to determine that, and which rules it wishes to adopt. just referring specifically to the motion that was submitted at council back in January, you will note within there, there was a point 2 that the amendment should take effect at the conclusion of the full council meeting on the 12th of January 2026. Clearly, that's something that's not possible to do because the motion wasn't agreed at the 12th of January 2026. So if the committee was minded to make a recommendation back to full council to amend the council procedure rule as suggested in the motion, it would need to do that and amend the date to take effect at the conclusion of the next full council meeting, which I believe is the 2nd, March the 2nd. I think I'll pause there, Chairman. Quite happy to answer any questions that members might have.
Councillor Pierpoint.
I'm in favour of this particular motion for the simple reason is we come to council meetings and we listen to one or two people just having a personal pop at officers, at portfolio holders, more or less like a personal attack. And some of the questions are not relevant to the business of the day. And quite frankly, if anybody's got 100 questions to ask or 30 or 14 questions to ask, they can take those to the actual committees or to the portfolio holder or to the cabinet. I don't think we need to sit and listen to some individuals who want to have a go at portfolio holders and try and trip them up and trying to be clever, or over the system. So personally, I think one question is sufficient with a supplementary, as we said. And so far as I'm concerned, I don't want to sit and listen to some person rabbiting on, having a go at people all night in a council meeting. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I fully support what Councillor Pierpoint has said. It seems to make good use of our time in full council, and I think that this is a sensible step forward. People can ask a question, ask a supplementary. It concentrates the mind upon what you want to ask rather than a whole series of questions, which of course most everybody else has to sit and listen to. So I'm quite happy with this modification of our rules. I think it's very sensible and it fits in with what other people are doing elsewhere around the country. So it seems to be a sensible step forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Dorian, sorry, you want to speak first?
Well, the ignorance and the duplicity is breathtaking. I've been so looking forward to this.
Speak, please.
It's almost impossible for that man to let me speak. If our current mayor knew anything about the Constitution, he would know that all questions submitted have to be submitted to the Chief Executive and have to be passed by the Chief Executive as being of relevance to council business. So his point is nonsense. Your duplicity, Councillor Woodliffe, astonishes me. The person who has asked the most questions in council since May 2023 is you. Go back and check. Is you. And now you want to ask, Chairman?
Can you let your Councillor Dorian please speak?
And if you're going to chirp in from the cheap seats, put your microphone on and let the public hear you. No, they can't. So Councillor Woods.
Can you please?
Councillor Izard. No, it's Councillor Izard speaking now. I can wait. Put your microphone on if you're going to chirp in.
We're just kind of hoping that you
aren't you going through the chair? Aren't you going through the chair? Aren't you going through the chair if you want to speak?
We would prefer if you would.
I would prefer if you go through the chair.
Points, please.
Councillor Dorian and Councillor, will you please let Councillor Dorian speak?
Breathtaking. You asked the most questions in all the full council meetings put together, and now you sit there and pontificate, as you did at the last full council, saying the place to ask questions is in committee. And the only cabinet member to attend a committee meeting in the last 6 months was Councillor Baxter, who came to one committee meeting. So there's no point in relying on cabinet members to be present at there's nobody here tonight. Dale Broughton had a paper, Sandeep Ghosh had a paper, but they're not here, are they? So there's no political questions can be asked, which makes a nonsense of your argument. Now, if we're going to change the constitution, if we are going to mess about with the constitution that served this council well, I know you're all neophytes, I know you're all novices, I know you all really don't want to be here. But if we're going to mess about with the constitution, put your microphone on. If you're going to chip in.
Give that, I take objection to that statement. Now take it back and apologise to all these people here.
Chance to speak yourself once Councillor Doreen speaks.
This is a man that called me a beast and refused to apologise. And it's on tape. It's on tape. You called me a beast and then called me a liar when I challenged you on it and asked for an apology. How dare you? So if we're going to mess about and tinker with the constitution, let's not have it rooted in lies, shall we? Let's have it rooted in truth. So the reason you want to do this is that multiple questions from the same member can extend proceedings. That is a blatant lie. It can reduce time available for wider debate. That is a blatant lie. And do you know why it's a blatant lie? Because the average amount of time of our full council meetings, where we are permitted 3 hours per meeting before we have to take a vote to go over, 3 hours, our average across 15 meetings, I didn't count the AGMs, you'll be glad to know, but across, which were even shorter, across 15 meetings, the average time is 1 hour and 14 minutes. 1 hour and 14 minutes, and this lot want home to the Horlicks. It's not good enough. We are here to represent the public who elected you. And you want to get home after 1 hour and 14 minutes. The information's all there. You know I do my research. You know I do due diligence. You go and check for yourselves that you're lying to me, you're lying to the public of Boston when you write this rubbish and then you want to use it to change our constitution. It's not good enough. And then the last point you make is that questions limit opportunities for other members to participate. Another lie. Because if we've only gone for an hour and 14 minutes, we've got another hour and 45 minutes where anybody can speak that wants to speak. The trouble is you don't want to speak. You want to sit there mute like you have done the whole night here tonight and like you do at every other full council meeting. Oh, we know what you have to say, but we're not interested in what you have to say.
Order, please.
So what you're doing is categorically based on a lie, and I want no part of it. I know you've all been whipped. I know you've all gave out your allowances. You're all in the same gang now. Pryke and Woodliff in with this lot. Well, good luck to you. And you, Mr. Chairman, you're in with them as well. You're a disgrace. So go on, have your vote. I want no part of it. And I hope the public of Boston see you for what you are.
So we have a proposal by Councillor Pierpoint, seconded by Councillor Woodley. Yeah.
I'm amazed at Councillor Dorian's casual insults in every other sentence in that rant. She can't even refer to colleagues by their title. She just used a surname. We don't refer to her as Dorian. We may want to refer to her some other way, but we don't. So I think she should apologise to us for that. Now, with her implied criticism of Councillor Woodliff, asking so many questions in council, has she forgotten that Councillor Woodliff is the leader of the opposition? And she doesn't like being asked questions about her decisions, obviously. But to retrospectively attack Councillor Woodliff for raising points in those meetings is amazingly undemocratic. And again, I think Councillor Dorian should apologise to Councillor Woodliff for her attack on him.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not asking for any apology from Councillor Dorian or whatever. Okay, it's a reasonable debate and so on, and she's expressed her views, and she's entitled to do so, and she's entitled to attack me if she wants. I don't mind. It makes no difference to me. But I'm very happy to second this motion. I think it makes better use of the time we have in full council, and I know a lot of members are very annoyed about having to sit through some of the theatrics that we've had to put up with over the last 12 months. So I'm very happy with this. But yeah, if Councillor Dorian wants to attack me, that's fine. It's her decision. She's a councillor and I'm councillor too. So I accept whatever comes my way, Councillor Dorian. Thank you, Chairman.
And then Councillor Dorian.
Thank you, Chair. Basically, I kind of look at this and say that you've given a lot of facts about how it was previously, and I don't see that going forward because under your leadership, I think the opposition had to ask so many questions because there wasn't any kind of broad sense of being. This cabinet is much more involved with other parties and other remits. It's a much more friendlier kind of cabinet. It's a much more friendlier atmosphere in the whole council chamber. And I think that's probably why so many questions were asked, well, your leadership, that probably isn't required now. But of course, you cannot stop yourself when it comes to asking questions to sideline into personal attacks on people. It's your behaviours that have led to this position where we are now. You probably may never be able to change those. And we just can't go to a council meeting where you spend time asking other councillors how they've performed over the last 3 years. There's no requirement for that. There's no need for that. And that was total time wasting on my part. So I fully endorse this change in process so that it doesn't occur again.
Councillor Dorian.
I'll start with a point of personal explanation. I wasn't insulting Councillor Woodliff's asking of questions. I honour and praise that. That's what the opposition is there to do, but you're not a real opposition anymore. That's the point, isn't it? I was criticising his pretending to be all conscientious in opposition when I was a leader, and now no longer a conscientious opposition because he doesn't want to ask questions anymore. So it's that being so disingenuous, being the person that's asked the most questions. I welcomed it. Bring it on. Every member of the Tory group asked questions. Every member of your group, bar the Austins, asked questions at full council. And that's how it should be. You shouldn't be frightened of questions. That's what you're there for. You're the administration. You're making decisions. You shouldn't be frightened of questions. If you're doing the job properly, you shouldn't be running scared of anything at all. And actually, I don't know what you're talking about explaining the last 3 years. I've never asked a question about the last 3 years, ever. You're talking rubbish.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't want to waste members' time, but Councillor Dorian, a lot of the questions I asked you when you were leader were to support you. Surely you remember that. Most of the questions I asked were to enable you to expand upon your policies. So that's why I asked most of the questions. I don't need to ask questions now of the current leader because I talk to him one-to-one all the time. It's a very, very fluid situation. But it wasn't with you in charge, unfortunately. It was never fluid. It was one-man band with you. But I did try to support you when you were leader. I thought I had a responsibility to try and support you and help you to put across your policies. So the questions that I asked were always in support of you. I didn't write questions to trip you up. And I'm not quite sure what that means. I don't understand that. But that was what it was done for, was done to help you and to help the council to explain to the public listening what was going on. Now, I don't need to do that anymore. I say I've got a very good relationship with Dale, the current leader, and we talk all the time. That's something you never managed to do with me. You isolated everybody, tried to run everything from yourself, and that made it very, very difficult. That's why I still try to help you and support you in full council. But now it's not necessary. I'm leader of the opposition, but I have a very good relationship, a working relationship with our current leader, and it does work. Under you, it never did work. Thank you, Chairman.
Just a point of personal explanation yet again. I have a very different recollection than you, Councillor Woodliff. I'll just leave it there, and I will remind you of a phrase. No, I won't remind you of a phrase you once said. You'll be too embarrassed.
We have a proposal proposed by Councillor. Yeah. So I know whether Mr. Morningshaw would like to come back.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to clarify in terms of the paper in front of you. You've got effectively 3 elements to that motion where the council was being asked to resolve something, and so I presume I'm just checking with you, Councillor Pierpoint, that is what you are recommending back to the full council. So that be that to amend Council Procedure Rule 11.2, questions on notice at full council, to state that a member of the council may submit 1 question only to full council per meeting. Point 2, that this amendment shall take effect at the conclusion of the full council meeting on the 2nd of March 2026. And thirdly, that the monitoring officer be authorised to update the constitution and any associated guidance documents accordingly to give effect to the amendment. Is that, just for clarity, wanted to check that's what you were proposing?
Thank you.
So that was proposed by Councillor Pierpoint, seconded by Councillor Woodliff. All those in favour, please show. Carried. Against.
Ray, would you please record my vote? Thank you. Lies, lies, lies.
That brings us on to the next item on the agenda, which is the work programme. Which starts on page 53 of your agenda. Councillor Pride, I think you've got some feedback.
A note to everyone that the town centre group report will be, the draft report will be circulated to members in the next week. So waiting for confirmation of 1 bit of government information. I expect we will be able to agree something for the next scrutiny committee meeting in March. I can't remember the date right now. So our report should be available to this committee at its next meeting.
Thank you. So if that can be added to the work programme.
For the March meeting.
For the March meeting. Members got any other points they wish to add to the work programme?
Yeah, something that we've touched on before, Chairman, training for all members.
Yep.
At PSPS, we have had extra training, which was brought about by certain individuals. I do think that we ought to protect ourselves and have further training in, you know, our rights and wrongs as being councillor, which we've already spoken about, haven't we, in the pre-meeting, Chairman? So I think that ought to be added to the work programme. I know it's more work, folks, but I think it's important that we protect ourselves.
Thank you. So
Thank
if we could have something added to the work programme along the lines of a refresher course for members on their obligations and duties.
In terms of constitutional responsibilities.
In all aspects.
And all that, and the
Today as well.
I mean, you know,
from the
there is the issue of, for example, members appointed to an outside body by the council. Are they actually members of that body, or are they actually the council a member of that body, and should they declare it or not and stuff? Just a refresher on how we should be reporting.
Thank you, Chairman. Through you, I think the monitoring officer would comment or make a comment, who's got a broader view, I think, on member training, etc.
Yeah, thank you. Just for clarity, is that a paper that you'd want to come back to the committee, or is that a request from the committee for us to go away as officers and look at some training around those areas? Because I'm conscious, obviously, training in a committee environment isn't normally the preferred method.
No,
it's the latter.
It is a report on training. Though I think, in truth, there's a consensus. I think we could cut to the quick. I think there is a need for that training, and so I don't think necessarily we need a report to come back to us. I think we do just need the training. The members happy with that? Yeah. So I don't think we need to, put you to the problem of actually then reporting back. I just think we need, a refresher on things, on the stuff we were told when we were first elected, and maybe now makes slightly more sense that we are, members have got more experience.
And can I just add something, Chairman?
Yes.
And a full record of who's attended and who's actually had the training, please. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So that completes. Nobody else wants anything to add to the work programme other than that. Now, as you can see, we've got some more things coming up. As you must be aware, the portfolio holder at county for highways has resigned, and so there is a new portfolio holder. But we're in the process of.
We are indeed, Chair.
Confirmation of trying to carry on, with what's going to happen anyway. So we will confirm that. And it is my proposal, all things being equal, that we will have a workshop at the beginning of the next council year, where we can more informally talk through things that we want to be looking at as a committee. So that will be happening as well. And with that, that completes tonight's meeting. So thank you for your time. Thank you, John.